Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 789A, and today's date is October 12th, 2015, and the title of this episode is Fed Officials Call for NIRP to Prop Up the Economy as the Collapse Accelerates. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. Tomorrow, Tuesday, I'll be uploading an interview with Harley Schlanger. If you are on the X22Report.com email alert system, you will receive an email. If you signed up to the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel, YouTube should send you an email. If not, you can come right over to YouTube. Just type in X22 Report Spotlight. It will bring you right to the video. Or you can come over to the X22Report.com site, scroll down a little bit, look over to your right, and you'll see the video on the right-hand side. Let's get right into the economic collapse financial news. Now, we're going to head right out to Greece, and of course the corporate media, the U.S. government, central bankers, and pretty much everybody else is kind of saying that everything is fine in Greece. Everything's back to normal, and what a great job by giving them more debt. But what we are seeing is that things are really not fine in Greece, and the Greek authorities right now, they unveiled stricter capital controls for civil servants and pensioners this weekend. And what this means is that they will only be able to withdraw 150 euros per week, with the cash withdrawal cap being 420 euros per week. That is a total of 600 euros per month. Think about this for a second. They're holding their hard-earned money. They will not let them take it out. The rest of their wage or pension, they will have to spend by using debit or credit. So they don't want them to hold it in cash. They don't want them removing the cash from the banks. We are seeing an introduction on the ban of cash. This is what we are seeing right now, because what happened when Greece was making that decision if they should go with the creditors, the central banks, their deal, or if the Cyprus government was going to say, you know what, we're not going to go and we're going to remove ourselves from the euro system. They started to take their money out of the bank because they were very nervous. They knew what happened in Cyprus. They knew there were capital controls, and it left the banks with really nothing in them. There was so much withdrawn at the time because they were prepped. They were ready. They knew what was happening. So what we're seeing right now to stop this, because people are still continually taking their money out of the bank because they rather hold it than have the bank hold it, they're putting a stop to this. They're basically placing a ban on cash. This measure right now that's going on, it will affect about 2.65 million pensioners and 600,000 civil servants. I mean, it's just absolutely unbelievable. And this is just the first step. You know, in January of 2016, they become eligible to do bail-ins. And we're going to have to wait to see how the government of Greece, the central bankers, what they do at this point, because you know they can't pay off this debt. You know the government is selling off pieces of the country to the highest bidder. And we're going to have to watch this very, very carefully, because this is what's coming to the rest of Europe and to the United States. And we're seeing it unfold right in front of our eyes. Now, out in the UK, their economy is not any better than anyone else's. Actually, it is declining just like every other country. And there's a new report that suggests that homelessness in the UK is more than 8 times higher than the official figures. I'm sure everyone is not surprised about this, because government officials and their figures are usually lies. They don't tell you the truth. And we're seeing a report which was published by Centrepoint. This is the UK's leading charity for homeless young people. It says 136,000 young people ages between 16 and 24 sought emergency housing in England last year, 2014. This is while only 16,000 people are officially classed as statutory homelessness. So what we're seeing right now is the government is trying to downplay this. Just like here in the United States, they're downplaying pretty much everything: unemployment, GDP, manipulating the numbers to make everyone believe something else than what's really happening. And it's happening the same way in the UK. The government wants people to believe something else than what's really going on. We know here in the United States, they lowered the gas prices, and of course during the holiday season of last year, they thought this was going to have the everyday person go out, take this extra money, and start purchasing. The opposite actually happened. The sales were way down. Black Friday, Cyber Monday were absolutely awful. And the whole holiday season was a bust. And we know there's many different agendas with lowering the gas price. It's trying to put a lot of pressure on Russia. I believe also it's to keep the costs down in companies, especially UPS, FedEx, and other companies that have all different deliveries, work machinery, to keep the price of gas down. Helps the corporations out. And they really thought that the people were going to go out there and just spend on things they really don't need with all this extra money. But again, we know that people don't have extra money. And Gallup finds that that's absolutely true. At the end of this summer, 35% of Americans said they were spending more on gasoline. And I do the same exact thing, and I'm sure all of you do, where you say, okay, listen, it's cheaper, so I'll put a little bit more of gas, I'll put a little bit more gas in my car, or put the same amount of gas in the car. But the rest of the money, I'm not going out and spending it anywhere else. And gas is something you need because you need to get around. All this other stuff that's in the stores, you really don't need. You might want it, but you don't need it. And we're starting to see that from the Gallup poll, Americans are taking their hard-earned money and getting things they actually need. Food, fuel. They're going to pay for electricity, heat, rent, mortgages. And all the discretionary purchases, leisure activities, clothing, consumer electronics, actually, they're spending far less at this time. And this is because people aren't making the same amount of money that they were before. A lot of people who had those full-time jobs, and we see a lot of layoffs happening right now, are getting part-time, or if they are getting a full-time, it's not the same pay. They're down making less. And I'm hearing from a lot of people, and this is absolutely holding true, where a lot of people that were applying for jobs, it's very difficult to find a job. Those people who are being laid off, they can't find the same high-paying job. I remember there was a time where if you're looking for a different job, you put your resume out, and you're able to get, maybe 3, 4, 5,000 more than the job that you were in. But today, it's actually the opposite effect that we're seeing. Right now, the top 0.1% of U.S. households own as much wealth as the bottom 90%. Now, what's very interesting about this, back in the 20s, approaching 1929, the top 0.1% reached 25% of the wealth. And it crossed the other 90%, the bottom 90%, back in 1926. Today, we are about to cross the threshold right now where the bottom 90%, which is declining, and the 0.1%, which is increasing, is going to cross. And it looks like this is going to happen in the next few months. And it's just a matter of time before this system completely comes crumbling down. Now, the Baltic Dry Index is continually dropping. It is around 809. It's the lowest in over 3 months and the lowest for this time of year since 1986. If we look back to last year, when unemployment was higher and they were telling us that, things were worse because now it's much better. We're at 5.1%. We're in this incredible recovery they're continually reminding us of. We saw the Baltic Dry Index at this time was around 1,500, almost double of what it is right now. And the Baltic Dry Index is continually falling. And this is the raw material that factories use to produce merchandise for the consumer. And the consumer, they're not purchasing at this time. So the factories don't need the raw material. And this is why we're continually seeing this drop. The Fed quietly revised the total U.S. debt from 330% to 350% of GDP, and nobody said a word. After discovering another $2.7 trillion in debt. And actually, all the corporate media, the government, everything was quiet about it. But we know this system right now that we're in is continually declining. Central banks are selling U.S. government bonds at a fastest pace on record. They're dumping them. Do they know something we don't? And we know right now the Fed went back on its word. It was going to raise interest rates, and we know why they did this, because once they raised the interest rates, this system would come tumbling down. It would not be able to survive. The real estate market, the automobile industry, everything would come to a screeching halt. But what they do ahead of time, and they never do anything by surprise, they start saying things like, oh, maybe we should introduce NIRP, negative interest rates. Maybe there will be a time that we need it. And they did this with tapering, and we know they're doing this covertly, where they're continually creating money, where they haven't stopped the quantitative easing. And we can see for over months and months and months, they've been telling everyone they're going to be raising interest rates. And now they started to switch their story where they're saying, no, we might go to negative interest rates. And first, we find that the Fed official hinted at NIRP during the Fed's September 2015 meeting. Then on October 9th, the Fed President Bill Dudley stated that negative rates were an option, but not a conversation for right now. This statement was followed by Minneapolis Fed President stating point blank that the Fed should consider negative rates. The Fed has never once hinted at or discussed NIRP during the policy meetings. Then, in the span of 3 weeks, we've not only had an anonymous Fed official state that he or she believes NIRP is coming to the U.S., but 2 highly visible presidents calling for NIRP. This is basically how the Fed pushes its agenda. It introduces it, and eventually what's going to happen is they're going to have to use NIRP as a weapon as the economy collapses. And eventually we know they're going to put a ban on cash. We see it happening in Greece right now, because they have no alternatives at this point. What's happening in the Middle East is completely falling apart. What's happening in the economy in Europe, UK, Canada, US, the whole thing is collapsing. And it's accelerating right now. Now, Obama's trade, the TPP, according to the Doctors Without Borders, is going to go down in history as the worst trade agreement for those medicines in developing countries. Now, why? Why is this going to happen? They're saying that TPP will drive up the cost for some of the most expensive drugs on the market in the poorest countries. One of the biggest sticking points in the negotiations had to do with data protection for the biological drugs. Biologics are treatments made from biological sources, including vaccines, antitoxins, proteins, and many others. It even includes Ebola. As the Brookings Institute explains, biologics are much more structurally complex than regular small molecule drugs, and therefore more difficult and expensive to make. costing an average 22 times more than the non-biological drugs. Because of the high prices of these drugs, companies are very interested in developing biosimilars, cheaper copies of the original. But because of the TPP, what does it do? It allows these companies to be protected, and there are new rules around this, and it gives them exclusivity for 8 years. Now, another portion of the TTIP and CETA might remove people's rights from basic human needs, because under TTIP and CETA trade deals, what they want to do is they want to privatize the water supply. So they want to take the water supply that we have now and privatize it. And this way, multinationals could potentially turn off someone's water supply over a pay dispute. And this is raising human rights concerns. Now, Brazil is negotiating a free trade agreement with the Eurasian Economic Union. The deal is on the agenda in Mercosur. Mercosur is the South American trade bloc that unites Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Venezuela. So all these countries are moving towards Russia and away from the United States government's central bankers. And this is the major problem. We're seeing other central banks of different countries like Brazil, Venezuela, all dropping treasuries. Many countries are dumping the dollar, moving away from it. And as the United States continually tries to push their agenda across the globe, it's getting harder and harder to keep the empire alive. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.